What is up, guys? Wrestling Premiere is here. Okay, it's been a very long time since I made something on Legacy. I owe you guys on that one. The group in itself had huge potential on paper. It was supposed to be a platform for the group, but it ultimately didn't really do much for their futures. In regards to this, Legacy were in some cool programs with DX and John Cena. In the latter's case, they had done too many matches and they're hit or miss. Depends on how you see things. Last time I made a video on Legacy, we had concluded at breaking point, and in this video, I'm looking to finish the entire series. I was like, hey, let's not split them. Let's just do it once and for all. So right now, let's get into it. Batista, Orton's old foe, made his return the following night in Toronto. Legacy, of course, were the ones responsible for taking him out, and as Batista's teasing retirement, the ex-champion interrupted. While he was distraught over losing the title, he was joyous over the end of Dave's career. Orton didn't want to hear all of this. He was like, oh, you're not retiring because of an injury, but because of me. Turns out it was all a joke to Dave, which angered Orton easily, and he wasn't hurt. Matter of fact, he tested the shoulder with a clothesline to Randy. Batista was here not to retire, but to announce that he's leaving for SmackDown. However, he's got one more match against Orton, and it's no holds barred. Ahead of that match, Legacy decided to come out and flaunt about the previous night in Toronto. They mocked DX, asking if the fans were ready before asking if they're ready to welcome a new era. He talked about the victory from the previous night before listing a bunch of guys who failed to make DX tap. They even mentioned how Rated RKO failed to do it, and DiBiase called it a historic victory. Oh, we made DX tap out, yada yada, before calling this the beginning. Now, it wasn't like Legacy wanted a simple victory. They wanted DX gone. Cody perceived this as a watershed moment. No longer were they the sons, rather the parents were the fathers of Cody and Ted. Now, this is where they're obviously over-exaggerating because they're heels, you know. But he ended up facing HBK a few minutes later. Michaels put in a good performance, but his left eye was a huge problem. Unless Rhodes had to cause the DQ in a full-on brawl ensued between the two sides. HBK and Ted were fighting it out in the crowd, whereas Triple H and Cody were on the other side. As for Randy Orton, he took the L to Batista, and this was in part due to John Cena, who blocked the backstage area, essentially forcing him back in. Orton had a bad weekend on top of that, you know, he lost the I Quit match, but he was going to get his title shot soon enough inside Hell in a Cell. Orton wasn't the only Legacy member competing inside the cell, as Rhodes and DiBiase were set to face DX. The veterans, of course, felt extremely confident over their chances inside the cell because of their experience. Rhodes and DiBiase, you know, they never competed in a cell match. They mentioned Unforgiven 2006 and even went as far as to say they actually liked Vince and still did all of that. Imagine what they could do to somebody that they actually hate. Triple H also mentioned how the pay-per-view will mark the end of the feud, and Randy Orton, meanwhile, was set to sign the contract for the Hell in a Cell match. Jerry Lawler revealed that there's a no physicality rule, and the challenger thought that Cena was under the belief that he's at his weakest. He claimed the contrary, saying he'll do whatever it takes to win the title. Unlike Cena, has actually been inside the cell and knows what it takes to win the match. John Cena did what he does best. No sell all of this and show a clip from the I Quit match of Orton shouting those two words. Cena said that he predicted all this would happen, and Orton would come out, make all kinds of faces and complain. John wasn't worried. He nonchalantly signed the contract and told Orton that it's his last chance. If he loses, no more rematches, no title shots, none of that. The man was staring a hole at him, and soon enough the champ actually got serious and said that he knows what Orton should be capable of, whereas he, Randy, doesn't know him. It's not the usual giving your best shot or whatever. No. He was promising to destroy Randy Orton, and he responded saying he'd love nothing more to RKO Cena right now through this table, but he's legally unable to. Orton began talking about Cena's arrogance and how people despise him because of it before bringing out Jericho. Cena actually took this challenge seriously but was unable to respond, and so MVP and Mark Henry made the save, and Teddy Long was salivating at the thought of a six-man tag even though he was on SmackDown. Instead, Cedric the Entertainer booked the six-man tag featuring all of those men. About that match, Orton managed to pry a victory away from the babyfaces with the help of Chris Jericho. What this also meant was Cena's got to face Jericho alone, you know? They had this little stipulation, if you lose, you got to face these two in a handicap match. Ahead of Sunday, the Viper gave his final thoughts on the match. He saw the Hell in a Cell as an environment where the sadistic thrive. He said that Cena's going to struggle, simply put. And Legacy, meanwhile, weren't exactly worried about being inside the cell. Cody thought the people didn't expect them to win the submission match, yet they proved everybody wrong. They cut this and this is what HBK called it, a very boring promo. I would talk about it, but honestly, I got bored myself, and we don't have to mention everything. Ted saw his DX trying to take the buzz off the beating they took, and Hunter was about to say some stuff, but HBK reminded him that this is a PG show. He was desperate to call them assholes, but I guess he respected the TV rating. Hunter cut this crack-induced promo compared Cody to the Incredible Hulk's alter ego, Bob Barker, and HBK had to correct them saying it's Bruce Banner. And Cody didn't care about this. He didn't care about the reasoning, but HBK refused to let him talk, calling it rude. He's like, hey, you can't be talking, it's rude. Triple H wanted to say that unlike Bruce Banner, they loved when the monster came out. The DX were pretty damn impatient, wanted to fight then and there, and Rhodes and DiBiase were like, not tonight. Michaels thought it was typical, and the game had to inform them that there's no running on Sunday because they're locked inside a cell. There's none of that, it's going to be hell for Legacy. Okay, there's some hype behind this match. I believe everybody expected DX to get their win back because it's DX. Do you seriously think they're going to lose 2 times in a row to a young team? I don't think anybody doubted that. On the topic of John Cena, he failed to beat Jericho, and once again, Orton came out. He stalked his prey, walking slowly with all the composure in the world. Cena, though, suddenly gained his stamina and was back to being fresh. Orton was stuck with the champion at a very inconvenient time because the cell was being lowered, and by the time he found his moment, it was too late. Orton was trapped, the door was open, but Cena wouldn't give way, and it turned out to be a one-sided battle. Orton suddenly decides to climb up to the top, and up to this point, it had been a very, very long time since they fought on the top of the cell. Last time was probably like in 2002 or something along the lines of that. As expected, Randy failed to do anything and took the AA. Now, with regards to Legacy's Hell in a Cell matches, let's start with the WWE Championship match. Now, in my personal opinion, I didn't really like this one. Last time I watched it, the whole thing felt heatless, and you'd expect more in a Hell in a Cell match. Especially the first cell match for John Cena. Like, it should have been the most intense thing on the show. The match itself wasn't bad if you take out the cell, but in kayfabe, Orton was right. He was more sadistic. But it didn't involve the cell at all. Rather, the punt was the one move that scored him the W. Legacy was proud of Orton and wanted to celebrate this victory, but he gave them a lesson saying, win or lose, you just don't walk away. However, they confidently assured him that they were prepared. Cody even went as far as to say that Randy sounds like his old man, and the new champion just wanted to teach them. He didn't appreciate them undermining what the cell was all about. There was some minor tension there between the two parties. DiBiase even told Randy to not underestimate them. There's not much tension there compared to what we get later on, but this was it's a long stretch, but the start of something. On the topic of that match, well, I thought it was a fitting way to end the feud. I liked it much more than the other cell matches. Legacy were the arrogant, ambitious upstarts, and this showed right before the match even began, as they attacked DX. Whatever that strategy was, it came to fruition as they isolated Triple H away from his partner. How did they do that? Well, they shut the door. From here, it turned into a glorified handicap match, and I love this moment in particular where HBK knows he's screwed. It's like he accepted his fate was to die trying. They took their sweet time in inflicting damage, all while Triple H was eagerly searching for a way in. Once it seemed like there was no way in, he walked out. Shawn was slowly being dissected. The man was basically living in one of those annoying-ass handicap matches in SDR 2011. Like, you couldn't do anything about it. There was no way out. The win was essentially a foregone conclusion. The crowd got quiet. Just as they're looking to wrap it up, Triple H comes in with a bolt cutter, and when he opened the door, the floodgates opened, and most importantly, the momentum shifted. Compared to everybody else, he was pretty damn fresh. The X returned the favor by tossing Ted out and dismantling Cody Rhodes. He was punished and then some. Chair to the throat. Sweet chin music and a sledgehammer, and that's all she wrote. DiBiase wanted to do something, but Michael super kicked him straight to Monday. I like the story itself. Did it drag? Yes. Triple H should have entered earlier, but it was a pretty fresh approach in my opinion. The Hell in a Cell match, we all know how they're usually done, but this was kind of unique. Triple H being forced to watch his partner slowly being destroyed as the minutes go by, end up finding a way in and the tides turned. Is it a must watch? Not really, but if you're gonna watch, I assume you'll enjoy it. As expected, DiBiase and Rhodes were unable to appear on Raw the next night, but their mentor certainly did. Viper was here to speak about the Hell in a Cell match. The new champion didn't appreciate the fans talking about backup or shortcuts. He beat John Cena clean and didn't want to hear anybody say otherwise. Orton knew damn well that John Cena was going to come out here and ask for a rematch, and it was clear that Randy had prepared what to say to John Cena. He comes out, donning his usual John Deere-inspired look, and he was thinking the rematch was now, but Orton struck verbally, telling him that it ain't happening tonight. Cena thought this confirmed that Randy didn't give a damn about the fans, but nonetheless he swallowed his pride and congratulated Randy on his title victory. John said that this rivalry has become the rivalry. When they're in the ring together, the result is amazing. John wanted to give the fans that one more match, but he wanted a great match, and so he challenged Randy Orton to an Iron Man match. John was calling this the final match. After this, there's nothing. There's no more rematches or anything like that, but the champion didn't see things the same way. He did agree that this should end things, but on his terms, of course. He said that if I win, you're gone from Raw for good. You could go to SmackDown, ECW, but Randy wanted him gone from his show. It was a very tempting decision, but ultimately John Cena accepted. Orton still added to the whole match. He made a no disqualification and no count-out match, and Cena was pretty damn hyped for this. He was eager to have this match, and you could tell by the mumbo-jumbo he was spewing. Following week, Legacy finally made their return. They were certainly battered and beaten from Hell in a Cell, but were looking forward to bragging rights. The duo were angry with not being included in the Raw squad, and even though they had a chance to qualify, it was only for one spot, and it was against John Cena. As expected, Cena posed to be a huge problem because he's freaking John Cena, 2009's version of Superman, and so Randy Orton had to intervene, and even then, Cody Rhodes rolled up Ted DiBiase, stealing the spot on the bragging rights squad. Nancy O'Deal took notice of this rift and booked a tag match between Legacy against Randy Orton and John Cena. The tension was brewing, you could cut it with a knife at this point. But Randy quickly shut them down. He told them that this main event's going to be a handicap match, and basically the champion was essentially the glue. Without him, the team falls apart, and to make matters worse, Ted and Cody were talking about pinning Randy himself, and so he gave them a stern warning. He told them, you better keep on thinking, rather than actually follow those thoughts. The match itself was essentially a free day for Orton. You know, he was extremely calm, composed, as everything was working in his favor. Scenes being worn down, his guys are working together unlike previously, all was good. But like the 2009 VMAs, things went awry at a moment's notice as John Cena tagged in Randy Orton. He couldn't tag out, obviously, and Rose tried doing the exact same thing that Orton told him not to do. They treated him like any other guy, so he desperately tagged out. Just as Cena's got some momentum, the champ tags in, DiBiase capitalizes and goes for the roll-up 1, 2, 3. Randy was absolutely incensed. He's livid with these turn of events, and if things weren't already bad enough, he took the FU. Since Snoop Dogg was running the show next week, he booked DiBiase in a match with Orton. Ted didn't feel remorseful about the match because it's not like he wouldn't have done the same thing, but to Orton himself, it was betrayal. And he straight up told him that in their match, you're not going to lay a finger. You're going to show respect, and maybe, just maybe, I won't kick you out of Legacy. It was a very fine line, and with regards to the match itself, I'm just going to say, it was one of the most important moments in the Legacy's run. Okay. This match, it was entertaining. Not for the moves, but for the story itself. DiBiase was stuck between a rock and a hard place. He was clearly growing angry with every strike, uppercut coming his way, and the crowd was slowly rooting for him as time went on. Orton wasn't pushing, he was smashing his buttons. It was really looking like DiBiase Jr. was going to strike. The fans were cheering, Orton's provoking him, and it was like, surely he's going to strike, right? And the moment he shoved him, the crowd exploded. But it turns out Teddy wanted to spot in Legacy, and Randy hit the RKO 1, 2, 3. He had total control over his men, and he couldn't muster up enough courage. But yes, the seeds were planted in Legacy's dissension. It was a very cool moment to see Ted. He was on the verge of striking back, but he just couldn't. He thought of the ramifications and felt that it wasn't worth it. Now, with regards to bragging rights, DiBiase wasn't involved with that whole Raw vs. SmackDown thing. His team fell short, and Cody Rhodes decided to blame Kofi Kingston for the loss. This turned out to be an ambush in Jamaica-less acts, and Kofi was left laying. This would hurt Orton's chances later on. Now, that Iron Man match, in my opinion, was a pretty good way of wrapping things up. It was one of the very first of its kind. It was chaotic as hell. One thing I loved was the psychology and storytelling. Like in the beginning, Randy knew that STF was going to wear him down, and so he tapped. Sure, he conceded a point, but he still had his energy. The points slowly added up, and Legacy at one point interfered. There was attempted murder, a Kofi Kingston interference, announce table spot, and the final quarter of the match was superb. That's when it got really interesting. John Cena was looking like he was heading to Friday nights, if you were 8, because this is Super Cena. There was no way he was going to go to SmackDown at the peak of his career. Can a person dream? And tell me this guy wasn't the best character of 2009. He was looking like the perfect lunatic. Like, look at this man. He was just doing so well at this point from the character standpoint. Orton ended up making the mistake of missing the punch and found himself in the STF. The crowd exploded, they were going insane, and Orton was desperate to hold on. He was hell-bent, but with 5 seconds, he tapped, and John Cena was the new WWE Champion. Awesome match, although there was some forgettable moments. Also, on the topic of John Cena losing, it was never going to happen. Like, the thought of seeing Orange John Cena at SmackDown seems pretty unimaginable. And I'm not going to say it wasn't interesting, it's just very unlikely. But if he were to move to SmackDown, that would have been cool. You know, we could have seen him face CM Punk, The Undertaker, Rey Mysterio perhaps, but he was never going to move to SmackDown at all. And that's a damn shame. Like, I always wanted to see him on SmackDown, you know, competing on Friday nights and all that, but it just never happened. Now, what the results of this match also meant was that Randy Orton couldn't receive his rematch clause because John Cena was champion. So he let out his frustrations on Kofi Kingston. This was after Kingston beat Chris Jericho clean in the middle of the ring. Orton was absolutely incensed, demented, all types of evil words, and when asked to explain things, he talked about how Kingston cost him a title. It was justice in his eyes. Rhodes and DiBiase wanted to calm the ex-champion down by gifting him with a special NASCAR vehicle. And it was a way of clearing things, you know. DiBiase and Rhodes had their issues with Orton recently. They were also eager to do something about John Cena and challenged him to a matchup. The champ didn't want anything to do with them, stating something along the lines of, oh, people are going to think Raw's having reruns. You know, it's repetitive, and I honestly find that ironic because we see a lot of rematches recently. He said that Orton can't get the title shot, but those two, they got to work for it. Cena's statements were proven right. Those two don't deserve it because they ended up losing to MVP and Mark Henry. To make matters worse, Randy Orton noticed this, and luckily for them, he wasn't focused on the loss, rather the WWE Championship. The Viper was extremely frustrated with how things went and tried ignoring the stipulation, saying he'll do whatever it takes to get back the title. Suddenly, Kofi Johnson popped up on the screen and said that nobody cares about what Orton says. The man was over the edge. He was raging while Kofi calmly explained where he was. He was shouting all kinds of threats to Kingston, and all he could do was talk about how durable his NASCAR vehicles were. Yeah, he really didn't care about how angry Randy Orton was. Kingston's trying to demonstrate stuff, all while Orton's raging like he lost a match in Modern Warfare 2 or something. His car was being scratched by keys, and to make matters worse, Kofi was sarcastically killing a bug on the hood of the vehicle. To top it all off, Kofi poured a bucket of paint and said that Orton's never looked better. And I love this promo. It was supposed to be the beginning of a beautiful run for Kofi Kingston, and never before had he shown that much intensity and skill in this promo. Like only a month earlier, Kofi was a laid-back Jamaican who never really seemed all that violent or intense. It was a good start. Because of the chaos and hatred between those two, the match was made for Raw the following week. Heading into the match, Kofi felt remorseless. He wasn't going to be bullied and said that Orton should look in the mirror and learn why he's no longer champion. Now about this match, it went south quickly with interferences and so it turned into a 6-man. Babyfaces won, but Orton for the most part remained unscathed. Kofi did get his shot in though. Shortly afterwards, a 10-man Survivor Series elimination match was confirmed for the pay-per-view, and ahead of the match, MVP and Mark Henry invited Kofi to the VIP lounge. He told both Mark and MVP that it wouldn't be possible to not include him in the team, and even called MVP Mr. 305. But anyways, they were showering him with praises. Felt like that moment where he destroyed the car was huge. I personally believe that as well. Then Legacy interrupted the celebration. The security stared a hole at them before suddenly thinking that they're cool enough to enter. Randy straight up called them street thugs. Talked about how Mark stole a victory from him, MVP being the definition of a common criminal, and mentioned how Kofi destroyed his car. Rhodes said that MVP did look VIP, but his buddies certainly weren't. Ted undermined the VIP lounge's setup and talked about how his bank account pales in comparison to his daddy's. Orton said they belong in the hood from where they came from. What the hell? And so Kofi slapped him. This led to a Henry Orton match. Not much really happened here, but Randy wins it, and afterwards Kofi sends him running. That's another promo that some people feel is kind of controversial. He's like, oh, you guys are from the hood or something along the lines of that. A lot of people did not like that at the time. Nonetheless, Kofi was still looking tough in the lead up to Survivor Series. Orton was actually running from him, and the following week proved to be an extremely memorable moment for Kingston in his career. So Orton was ready to punt Roddy Piper. Kofi runs in for the save and Orton sprints. As he's walking to the back, Kingston brings the fight to him. They brawl inside the crowd. Orton takes control and slows down the pace. Things seem bleak for Kofi as he found no answer to Orton's brutality, but he avoids the punt. He leads Orton back into the crowd. It was looking like the brawl was over, but Kofi, though, was still intense. He refused to let go, and he ended up hitting the boom drop from the top of the stairs. The fans went crazy, cheering and applauding Kofi's actions, and surely this was a monumental moment in his career. There's no denying that. When you have a moment like this in MSG, you're basically a made man. And at the end of the day, when we look at Kofi Kingston's top 10 moments in his career, this is surely in there. This has to be in the top 10, maybe even the top 5, right? Now, about the match at Survivor Series, I love it. Other than the fact that Matt Stryker called Mark Henry the chef of Hell's Kitchen, nothing bad about this one. I talked about it here. There's a video if you want a detailed explanation as to what happened. But long story short, Kofi looked great out there. Ended up being the only person facing off against 2 men who at the time held a total of 12 world championships, I believe. To make matters worse, CM Punk had him scouted because they had been a team not too long ago. He was being worn down, taken and beating, all while Randy Orton was slowly regaining his energy. The crowd was 100% on Kofi's side, and they believed in the gutsy underdog. He caught Punk 1, 2, 3, and as Orton entered, boom, he took the trouble in paradise. Within 10 seconds, he beat 2 of the best from 2009. Guys who, in my opinion, were top 5 that year, and look at the fans. They were so joyous, they were so excited to see what had unfolded. Everything that WWE was doing with Kofi Kingston at the time was like Kurt Hennig. It was perfect. It was all going very well in the way it should be, and when you look at it from that time period, you're like, hey, this guy might reach the very top, right? It's looking like there's a chance there because he beat 2 world champions. The previous champion was Randy Orton. On SmackDown, the previous champion was CM Punk, so it's a huge deal. The next night on Raw, a very calm and composed Randy Orton came on despite the guest host's entrance. The guest host, by the way, was Jesse Ventura. This was his first appearance in WWE since 1999. He wasn't always on the best terms with WWE, but they managed to have him appear here. The reason why Randy Orton interrupted was because he wanted a WWE title shot. According to him, the guest host can do anything they want. The man seemed extremely possessed, like the title was the only thing that was keeping him sane. The body did come out and turn back the clock, and he said that he respects Orton and his style, saying that he reminds him of himself. He wanted to bring something new, and the problem with this new thing was the fact that Randy Orton wasn't going to get a title shot. Because Ventura was fed up with the same guys getting title shots. He was like, oh, nobody who was an ex-champion, including you, will get a title shot. So he booked a breakthrough battle royal. In order to qualify for the battle royal, you gotta win a singles match. Randy told him that he's making a very big mistake, but the body didn't care. He's like, mistakes happen often. Now, this episode, for good or for bad, was pretty damn unique. We got to see some never-before-seen matches, such as John Cena versus CM Punk. But on the topic of Randy Orton, he felt that he was a victim of a conspiracy. He was being forced to sign a contract, barring him from challenging the title. Obviously, he didn't complain about this the previous month when he was champion, because that's a whole different story. Ventura, though, didn't want to deviate from what he believed. Legacy, meanwhile, punched their ticket to the main event while Randy Orton was still thinking of a way. Out of everyone that he attacked, he chose poor Primo. The ref didn't want to do this. He refused to ring the bell, but Ventura intervened. It seemed like he was canceling this, but he respected Randy's persistence in getting the title shot. The body told him that rules are meant to be broken, and he revealed that if he beats Evan Bourne, then Randy Orton is entered in the main event. Bourne, as expected, took an ass kick. I mean, Randy's essentially his kryptonite, and Orton confirmed his spot in the Battle Royal. Also, a little side mention, I remember being absolutely shocked that Ventura mentioned WWF. It was so unbelievable at the time, but anyways, the premise of this Battle Royal was kind of cool in my opinion. It gives a bunch an opportunity to challenge for the title and have a program with the top guy. It's something I want to see happen more often, and every once in a while, it'd be cool. Legacy on paper had a very huge advantage. Their strategy was simple. Divide and conquer. Orton didn't really do much, rather stand on the outside and observe the action. It took a while for him to re-enter, and Legacy was doing the hard work. But the duo were thrown out. Orton was once again haunted by Kofi Kingston, and he couldn't believe what had transpired. The crowd was extremely lively for this, but ended up being silenced when Sheamus won it. This was back when he was relatively unknown. I also think nobody thought he had a chance to win the Battle Royal, let alone beat Orange John Cena. Back to Orton. He would get his rematch with Kofi on the November 30th, 2009 episode. For Kingston, it was over before it began. Why? Because Cody attacked, and to make matters worse, DiBiase followed up with an onslaught towards the knee. And the way Randy Orton came out, you'd think dinner was ready. Despite this, Kofi was eager to have the match, even though he was wounded. For Orton, he was mostly on cruise control. Kingston had this moment, but all Orton had to do was respond with an RKO. Nonetheless, this was far from over. Orton, on the other hand, believed the contrary. He was really eager to get back in the WWE Championship picture, and the whole stipulation was bugging him greatly. Orton demanded that Mark Cuban reverse that decision, and Legacy even showed the flashback to Survivor Series 2003, and how Cuban took an RKO. He refused to grant Orton his request, and instead booked him in a match with Kofi Kingston for tonight. And since WWE refs are worse than the NBA refs, that's the truest fact I've heard today, he's going to be the referee. Cody says this thing Kenyon Martin and his mother. He told Cuban that they're all talk. On topic of Orton Kingston, Cuban couldn't let 2003 go apparently, and screwed him over hard by doing a fast count. Randy had that look on his face, you know the one, and Cuban announced that they should face off in a rubber match at TLC. About that match, not bad at all. Legacy tried instilling fear into Kofi's mind, but all he could do is bury those two and straight up walk into Orton's locker room and call him a coward. He said that he's looking forward to beating him down. In this segment itself, it's pretty unique. It showed the bravery that Kofi's got, and it was something different for once. Pretty cool. Kofi did put in a good performance and showed that there was a future on top for him, and at one point even hit the Trouble in Paradise, but Orton touched the rope. Ultimately though, Orton punted his arm. He tried blocking the punt, to the face, and slithered around like a snake. Kofi went for his best shot, but Orton had cat-like reflexes and ducked before hitting the RKO. Good match. Kofi looked pretty damn tough this time around. It wasn't no slouch, and it wasn't like he was buried or anything like that, because this feud was looking like it was going to continue from here on. On the other side of things, there was some good news for Orton. The WWE title picture was unlocked with John Cena losing. With that said, there were some issues within Legacy. Randy Orton felt that he had wasted a year and a half of his life with Rhodes and DiBiase. Why? Because they lost a 6-man tag to a trio that had never teamed up before. Orton didn't see why Legacy continued because he's not a WWE champion, and those two weren't tag team champions. The duo, though, didn't see things that way. Matter of fact, they wanted Orton to say things for being bailed out a bunch of times. Suddenly, though, he gave both men an ultimatum. Win your match, or get kicked out of Legacy. DiBiase won his match, Rhodes followed up, and it seemed like Orton gained back the respect for his proteges. Later that night, he interfered in Kofi's title match and caused the DQ before hitting the RKO. Now, why did you do this? Well, Orton believed that their issues had yet to be resolved. Next week, they certainly will. At the same time, Orton was trying to make moves. He asked Vince if he needs help in attacking Bret Hart, and in return receiving the number 30 spot in the Royal Rumble, but his request was denied in a huge way. Legacy, meanwhile, had grown a big head. They're telling Orton that he better beat Kofi because if he doesn't, then he's out of Legacy. But one thing to know is that the crowd cheered this revelation. Nonetheless, Kingston took the L once more, so I guess regardless of the whole stupid thing, he wasn't going to be pushed. I'm not sure. Well, Randy Orton, of course, focused on getting himself a title shot. You notice that Sheamus didn't have a challenger and asked Mike Tyson to insert him into the match. John Cena and Kofi Kingston also laid claim to the shot, and so a triple threat match was made. Winner faces Sheamus. Meanwhile, there's still some tension within Legacy. Those two argued over the Royal Rumble, claiming they're winning it before throwing digs at each other. Rhodes said that his 5th grade graduation video was superior to the Marine, and Randy Orton, on the other hand, was too busy calling Kofi Kingston a stupid person. Why? Because, well, you guys know this. He made the big mistake of not taking the punt, and Orton certainly let him know. Oh, and Legacy aided him in victory, so the tension between them disappeared for like the 3rd, 4th, or 5th time. One thing to note around this time period is the fact that Randy Orton was slowly transitioning into a tweener. He was getting a lot of cheers towards the end of 2009 and early 2010, even more so heading into the Royal Rumble. He paid a visit to Sheamus' match this week, and so the champion returned the favor. This time, unlike Randy, Sheamus caught him with the bro kick. As for Legacy, the group itself had a huge issue within. Things weren't working, so Orton told him to get things straight. He was talking about winning the title, and that was the only thing he was focused on. Wasn't helping though that Legacy was still having problems. On the day of the Royal Rumble, Cody was telling Orton that Ted had had a big head after his movie was released. He even told him that Ted was talking about winning the Rumble and beating Orton himself for the title at WrestleMania. And right before his match began, Ted wished Randy good luck before saying the exact same thing but twisting it around, saying Sheamus was going to be the opponent. Because of this, for the first time in a very, very, very long time, he didn't want neither man's help. The match itself, on the other hand, it wasn't bad or anything like that, but it fails to stand out. Rather, the post-match is much more memorable than the action itself. Sheamus isolated Orton's arm for most of the match, and it seemed like he figured things out, but Orton, who as expected was working as the babyface, started to gain momentum. Then Cody Rhodes randomly came in and assaulted Sheamus. This was at the most inopportune time because Randy Orton had finally hit the RKO. Orton's got a deflated look on his face before staring a hole at Cody. The fans were loudly chanting RKO, RKO, and they were ready for that face turn. Cody was continuously apologizing, but Randy didn't care and attacked. He's shouting at him, "You screwed it all," placed the blame on him, but Peacekeeper DiBiase came in. He takes a strike. Orton's telling Rhodes that he's done, but once he turns around, boom, bro kick. So when you look at the story itself, it's pretty odd to see that Randy Orton was the one who was turning face. Like, weren't Ted and Cody pegged for the turn itself? I'm not sure. I think it's because the crowd reacted way more to Randy Orton. The next night on Raw, DiBiase seemed extremely regretful over last night, but Randy didn't seem to accept the apology. Nonetheless, Legacy was still a group. At the same time, Ted and Orton qualified for Elimination Chamber, and Cody was kind of jello of Ted's participation, mentioning how he had to face John Cena, whereas Ted faced Mark Henry. They got into a small argument over who's better before Orton came in. He shut things down quickly, asking DiBiase if he thinks he's better than him. And why was he saying this? Well, because Ted was bragging about how he's better than Cody. He also said that Cody's intentions were good at the Rumble, but tonight, he's facing him. Because Sheamus was on a quest to soften the competition, Cody Rhodes took advantage of this distraction and beat Randy Orton. Wow, things were moving at a very fast pace at this point. Rhodes once again the following week accidentally sabotaged Randy Orton's match with Sheamus, and at this point he was like, screw it. DiBiase was holding him responsible, pointing the finger at him, and Orton decides to RKO Cody. Sheamus kicks Ted before walking into an RKO himself, and I remember this. I shamelessly hopped on the Randy Orton bandwagon because I knew he was turning face. He was getting a positive reaction every single week, and it was getting louder and louder and louder, and I guess they decided why not. Now on the topic of Elimination Chamber, this is when it gets real interesting. So Randy Orton was in there inflicting damage, shining bright. Ted then enters and they form an alliance. The duo worked as a unit, causing chaos and shutting down the opposition. At one point, Orton even saved DiBiase from getting eliminated, and as he's measuring Cena for the RKO, Rhodes comes in with a lead pipe. He tosses it to DiBiase, he blasts he blasts Randy Orton. Yep, he turned on his mentor and eliminated him. Once Orton realized what's up, it was too late, and funny enough, for all those efforts those two were making, Ted DiBiase was eliminated a minute later. All for nothing. Now, to Cody Rhodes, this was his opportunity to show that he was right. He claimed that DiBiase was proclaiming how he was going to eliminate Orton and win the title, but the Viper assured him that if there's anyone who's responsible, it's himself. Why? Because he wasn't the leader that he was. Whenever he didn't get his way, he would bully Rhodes and DiBiase, and that's why he asked for a 6-man tag team match tonight. Yep, he was going to team up with Ted, and hell, Orton even told Cody to tell Ted that he's sorry. Now, one thing to mention is that the Young Guns had something up their sleeve. Cody had felt that this whole thing went a little too well, and suspicions were proven to be true. Despite the plan set in motion, Randy dismantled Legacy before they even attempted it, and so there's the face turn. My kayfabe thoughts are, Orton was well aware of Legacy's plans. He wasn't stupid and turned on them. Before they can even go with the plan, the duo were starting to get greedy and a little too ambitious. And on the other side of things, it's funny to think that the man who was essentially the WWE's devil 6 months ago was now a babyface. Last time Orton was a good guy was 2005. But with that said, DiBiase and Orton did face off the following week, but Cody caused the DQ and Legacy attacked. Orton tried fighting back and actually succeeded in neutralizing the young duo, so this led to a handicap match in the March 8, 2010 episode of Raw. Right when the match began, Randy Orton attacked in order to gain a head start. He knew that his former proteges were intelligent and well-knowledged about the squared circle. He tried his best but ultimately fell short. That wasn't it though, as Cody hit Crossroads. They added insult to injury, mocking him with a pose, and shortly afterwards the match was confirmed for WrestleMania. It was going to be Cody Rhodes versus Ted DiBiase versus Randy Orton. Legacy triple threat match. On the challenge itself, he straight up said that he didn't take them seriously. Orton also claimed that at WrestleMania they're going to find out that without him, they're absolutely nothing. Rhodes and DiBiase once again interfered in Orton's business, ruining his match with Triple H. Just as the game was going to make the save, Sheamus kicked him. This led to a tag match between all 5 men on the final Raw before WrestleMania. Triple H threatened Orton, telling him that if he tries, he'll drop him. Before the match could even begin, Rhodes and DiBiase gave their final thoughts. They said that it was 18 months of temper tantrums, all kinds of things, and Rhodes felt that Orton did nothing with them. They were going to be stars regardless of Randy, and hell, he claimed that it was Orton who needed them the most. Ted said that neither of them care who wins the match at WrestleMania, as long as Orton loses. Both men took extremely slight jabs at each other. Oh, I'm 3 years younger than Ted. Oh, Cody wasn't born into a life of luxury, before Rhodes proclaimed himself to be the winner. Now, with regards to the match itself, the crowd was raucous for Randy Orton. He was getting explosive reactions, and it showed that from a reaction standpoint, turning him wasn't a bad decision. He, of course, didn't win it because of the numbers advantage. And about WrestleMania 26, I don't think anybody thought Legacy had a chance. No way. Orton was on fire. He had so much momentum and was far and away the better guy. Just didn't feel like a huge match. It was Randy Orton, the certified main eventer, the 5-time world champion or something along the lines of that, against 2 mid-carders. Also, I said before how it's odd that Orton was the one who turned babyface. But anyways, the match was just there. For as long as Legacy existed as a faction, it did not feel spectacular. Early on, DiBiase and Rhodes worked as a unit to keep Orton grounded. They started getting greedy and Legacy imploded. This was a huge error because Randy Orton was left alone and he burst out. There was a little moment where they stopped him, but it never led to much, and Randy Orton, with the entire crowd support, DDT'd them and punted Cody, all while Teddy was in shock. He tried neutralizing Orton, but was pushed away and took the RKO. Fans exploded and Orton's victorious. Decent match, but if you thought there was going to be some huge drama given the circumstances, you had another thing coming. Goes to show just how much Rhodes and DiBiase progressed in that time. Like, from the beginning of Legacy all the way to the end, their star power did not really increase that much. And sure, they had some experience under their belt, but they weren't bigger stars afterwards. Orton went on to feud with Jack Swagger, and DiBiase, we'll talk about him in a future video. You know, I'm interested in talking about that $1 million run. He randomly brought Virgil, desperately trying to be like his father, and Cody became dashing. Yes, this is Legacy. Overall, when you look at Legacy, if their objective was to make these two into stars, they did not really do that. Like, by the end of it, Cody is somewhat of a star now, but by the end of Legacy, their star power did not increase, in my opinion. They weren't treated as a much bigger deal following this. It took some skill from Cody and all the dashing, undashing to be a bigger star in a way. At the end of the day, they were just Randy Orton's henchmen. I'm sure they got that win over DX, but as I said, they weren't a big deal by the end of it. And on the other side of things, positives, they had some cool matches. You know, they had a cool program with DX. I enjoyed that. The whole Triple H and Randy Orton program from early 2009 is a must-watch, you know, despite the WrestleMania 25 thing. And there was a lot of cool moments involving Legacy, you know. But yes, this was a good-ass series. I had fun making all of those videos from the first, second, third, fourth, all of them. They were fun to make. My personal favorite to make was probably the second one. I was really hyped to make that one because I felt like I had advanced a lot as a content creator at the time. But yes, Legacy series is done. I'm interested in doing other factions such as the Four Horsemen. We could remake the Evolution series as well. I always wanted to do that again because vocabulary, the video quality, the audio quality is trash. It sucks. We got to do something about it eventually, right? What faction do you guys want me to talk about next? Please comment down below. That's the first video. Make sure you hit the crossroads on the like button and perhaps the RKO on the subscribe button. Peace. I'm out.